Greetings to everyone. My name is Prof. Frederick, and my crew members and I will be presenting on the German education system. We'll begin a presentation with introduction. Cameroon is one of the rare countries in Africa that has experienced 3 different colonial rules. According to Ngo, 1988, and Warner, 1996, the German administration was the first European colonial power to impose a domination on Cameroon from 1884. The end of their rule was precipitated by their defeat in the First World War by countries among which the United Kingdom and France, who participated in seizing the German colonies in Africa. That is how the German colonizers were replaced in Cameroon by France and the United Kingdom for much longer colonial rule on Cameroon, even if it was initially said to be provisional. According to Mark Ojong, 2008, Cameroon was a meeting place of several European countries, Germans, British, and the French, as well as the native Cameroonians. The European cultures claim superiority over the native Cameroon culture. As colonialists, European culture aimed at controlling the life of the native Cameroonian, that is, political, economical, social, cultural. They therefore developed philosophies of development for the colonies. With particular reference to education, the European colonial administrators developed philosophies for the development of education in Cameroon. Each colonial administration developed a philosophy of education which favored their interests. It is generally held that colonial administrators' goals were economic, but extended to political control in order to achieve economic goals. If this be the case, then educational goals of colonial administrators were to produce the manpower required for economic exploration and for administration. But the study of educational development in Cameroon also reveals that colonial administrators were bent on promoting their culture and civilization. According to Duncan and Liu, 2022, the colonial education that was imposed on Cameroonians by these countries was a poor content education system for basic skill development, oriented towards Christianization for domination or assimilation and exploitation purposes. The colonial education has not only deeply affected the local culture and epistemology, but succeeded in attaching local people to Eurocentric paradigms to the detriment of their values and culture. As a consequence, there has been an abundance of local paradigms and educational principles, and also divisions regarding the different colonial masters' heritage differences. Our educational system is a replica of the educational system of our former colonial masters, German and French, but the focus of this presentation will be based on the German education system with interest on historical, sociological, political, economic, cultural, and philosophical aspects that have influenced the Cameroon's education system over time. Now, let's look at the historical perspective. A historical evolution of Cameroon's educational system is the analysis exposes a complexity of African indigenous cultural colonialism by missionaries, including the Germans, who rejected traditional African educational system that invariably affected the African belief, attitude, and perspective. We can read more on this on Ebot Ashu 2024. When Germans arrived in Cameroon in 1884, they were initially interested in establishing educational system. Their targets were to protect their interests in Cameroon, realize some project, occupy the territory, and exploit the colony as much as possible. After a certain moment, they found out that they could extract more from the colony if they could use more local people after teaching them the German language and some basic skills. That is how they found the imposition of a colonial education system a good investment in Cameroon, which could help them to extract more and faster resources from the colony. The first school they created were private. The German Alfred Wohlmann gave the start by opening a primary school in 1885. In 1886, he submitted a project to the German administration not only to open a primary school, but also a school to train artisans and other one to train agricultural monitors. This is according to Angebel Atangana in 2010. During the same year, a request from Vatican to implement schools in Cameroon was addressed to the German government, and Otto von Bismarck government authorized Catholic priests to open schools in Cameroon. In 1887 to 1905, some private schools sprang up in Douala, Victoria, Garoua, and Yaoundé. The curriculum in the early years of primary school concentrated on Christian religious knowledge and German language. This is according to Omatesi and Omatesi 2008. In April 1910, the German administration enacted the education law, which addressed the following. 1. Prescribing the German language as the only medium of instruction in schools. However, the other language could also be used, therefore restricting the use of mother tongue in schools. 2. Primary education had a duration of 5 years, of which stipulated minimum knowledge was to be acquired. 3. Primary education was made compulsory for all children of school age. And 4. Subventions were to be given to mission schools on the condition that they encourage and emphasize the use of German. Cameroonians were sent to Germany for further studies. This is according to Ngo, 1988. Despite the enactment of this law that showed the growing interest by the German administration to impose a Western education system on Cameroonians, it did not get directly involved in school creation. In 1910, there were only 2 public schools in Cameroon, one in Douala and the other in Victoria, which became Limbe. While in 1913, the missionary already owned 613 schools in Cameroon, mostly located in the southern part of the country. You can consult Ngongang in 2010. From the historical perspective, therefore, Cameroon was first inhabited by African pygmies. It later became a German colony, and they were involved in the introduction of formal education in Cameroon. The Germans laid emphasis on basic education to the local population. Education under German colonial rule was motivated by imperial and missionary interests, as well as Cameroonian desire to acquire Western knowledge. Ebot, Ashu 2020, and Ojong 2008. There was very limited access to education. Education was accessible to elite families and to the German, Fonken 2007 and Tambo 2003. The German mandate brought forth gender disparities, saying education was primarily accessible to boys, while girls had limited opportunities for formal education. The German colonial history has left a lasting historical legacy, including the development of educational institutions, cultural exchange, and linguistic influences. Fonken 2007 and Tambo 2003. It is worth mentioning that the withdrawal of London Baptist Missionary Society marked the first interval of the short history of educational development in Cameroon. A British-oriented system of education was replaced by German-oriented system. This new administration, however, opened the way for other missionary bodies to establish themselves in Cameroon as follows. 1886, German Basel Mission. 1888, North American Baptist. 1890, the German Politin. 1891, German Baptist Mission. Thank you for listening. My mate will continue with the sociological perspective.
We're talking on the sociological perspective of German education system. Firstly, the German curriculum was limited to practical skills for vocational education, and this German curriculum was based mostly on the German language. Secondly, The German administration used German as their policy language to Germanize the indigenous population. In addition, Christian missionaries influenced cultural assimilation, and this promoted Christianity and European values. Again, the Germans introduced the Western style of educational system, which focused on vocational education.
I'll be talking about the political perspective. On July 12, 1884, King Akwal and Bell signed the Germano-Douala Treaty with the German merchants Edward Smith and Johannes Voss, respectively, representing the firms Woman and Jansen and Tomale. In this treaty, these Douala kings probably abandoned their rights of sovereignty, legislation, and the administration of their territory to the above-mentioned firms, making Cameroon a German protectorate. This was said by Fanso 1975. From then on, the Germans would administer the territory by practically all the domains of life, especially that of education, by establishing a foreign educational system. Education in this colonial context is defined as the act of bringing an individual to take and internalize the principles governing community life. The educational system is therefore understood to mean all the institutions involved in the educational functioning and also the overall organization of social architecture. That is to say, the general courses, studies, cycles, field of study, and orientation, amongst others. A few years after the signing of the Germano-Douala Treaty, the Germans set up an educational system to achieve various objectives. In this line, some of the objectives, among others, were the extension of colonial authorities by missions, the spread of the German language and the search for translators, and exclusion of the pidgin English language. This was said by Eyong Jetta and Brain 1974. This extension resulted in the settling up of several missions serving the interests of the Germans. These missions were entrusted with the heavy task of dealing with educational affairs. Some of these missions were the Protestants or the Basal Mission in Bali, located in Douala and in the northwest, which creates stations and employs European missions. This mission was a commercial enterprise with factories. I will continue with the economic perspective. Far from being neglected, technical education in all proportion was taken seriously by the various educators during the German reign. In 1910, a school for agriculture in Victoria and an official technical school in Boya appeared under the sponsorship of the German government. This creation was intended to provide to the administration the training of technical staffs, which were regularly sent in a small number to acquire practical training in Europe. Equally, in this field, the mission established remarkable industries, among others. The Douala printing press created by the Baptist mission, the important carpentry workshop of the Basel mission, and the Catholic Teaching Center in Douala and Yaoundé.
I'm called Ukop Giselle, and I'll be talking on the cultural perspective. Culturally, the German language policy for Germanization eroded native culture and reinforced German cultural dominance. There were marginalization of indigenous languages during the German educational system and promotion of German values and ideas and ways of life in the curriculum. We can see that in the table 1, were greatly encouraged. Indigenous cultural practices and traditions were often suppressed or discouraged in the educational system. Missionary plays important role in cultural assimilation. The German educational goal in Cameroon, like elsewhere in Africa, was to expose Africans to the superior culture with the hope of education will usher the native into the modern world and will make them more civilized. The German colonial educational philosophy was based on their desire to promote German and civilization. However, it is worth noting that the quasi-assimilation character of German colonial education system is clearly observed in official curriculum prescribed for schools during the German colonial administration. Unlike the French, the German colonial assimilationist philosophy did not regard the native Cameroonians as an equal and did not grant German citizens. Through the use of German language, native Cameroon studied the German culture and civilization. For example, the subject of curriculum consists of history of German Empire, domestic economy, geography, among others, were taught in German language. Another factor is the philosophical perspective. German philosophy of Cameroon's education emerged during the colonial era from 1884 to 1916 with the goal of cultural assimilation, exposing Africa to a superior German culture to foster mental control and modernization, focusing on structure, competence-driven learning, but also encountering resistance due to clashes with local culture and Islam. While the colonial system was short-lived, its legacy persists through current collaborations, such as with the Goethe Institute, promoting German language and culture and influencing decisions on harmonization inherited due to educational system towards democracy, equity, and integration.
To conclude, the German educational system has left an incredible mark on the Cameroon's educational landscape, influencing its structure, policies, curricula, and cultural attitude towards education.